It is a kind of a confusing holiday, isn't it? Bunnies and rabbits and Jesus. I don't know how that goes together. Well, happy Easter and happy 420. I will not hand out any edibles today. If you were expecting that, I'm sorry. But we are going to talk about awakening, breath, and spirit, and what it means to see reality differently. Because Easter, real Easter, is about realizing that maybe everything is not fine. It's about waking up in the middle of grief and confusion and fear and still daring to believe that love will have the last word. So we're in this series entitled Who Died and Left You in Charge? The answer is going to be obvious. Jesus died and left us in charge. Jesus died and gave us the mandate to go on and live out this revolution of love. And what I'm wanting us to do today is, first of all, understand that the empty tomb is our invitation from Jesus. So let's set the scene as it's related by Matthew and John and Luke. Mary Magdalene goes to the tomb while it is still dark. She's grieving. She's confused. Her good friend and her teacher has just been executed by the state, and now his body is missing. Theologian Barbara Brown Taylor talks about that moment, that resurrection is always announced, typically with Easter lilies, the sound of trumpets, bright streaming light. But it did not happen that way. If it happened in a cave, it happened in complete silence, in absolute darkness with the smell of damp stone and dug earth in the air. Have you all ever sat in the darkness of a cave? Maybe you've gone to Marvel Cave at Silver Dollar City and taken the tour, and they turn out the lights, and you're just in the absolute darkness. Or maybe you've explored a cave in the Ozarks where all you had with you was a flashlight. The caves have a darkness that you can feel. And you may feel in darkness today. Maybe not in the literal sense, but very much in the emotional and the spiritual sense. Mary Magdalene went to the tomb while it was dark. Not just dark on the outside. She was dark on the inside. She was experiencing the darkness of anxiety, of confusion, of fear, and grief. Many of us understand what it's like to move throughout the day in darkness. We're living in difficult times. You may be experiencing economic darkness, as we see in Charlie Brown Wannabe here. He says, I got a rock. The Easter Bunny says, what do you want from me, kid? Have you seen the price of eggs this year? Economic darkness extends to retirees and those like me who are looking at retirement. And here's a picture of Denise and me in our kitchen. Our actual eggs are worth more than our nest egg. So we're experiencing a little bit of an economic darkness. What darkness are you going through? You could be going through an emotional darkness of a breakup in a relationship, a financial darkness, the darkness of grief. Maybe someone in your life has died. The Easter story, though, reminds us that what appears to be closing could be opening. It reminds us that systems that seem immovable, situations that seem immovable, can indeed be rolled away. Barbara Brown Taylor continues in that thought where she says, new life starts in the dark, whether it's a seed in the ground, a baby in the womb, Jesus in the tomb. It all starts in the dark. So if you're in the dark, that is a prelude to light. If you feel like you're in the tomb on a Friday night, that's a prelude to being resurrected on Sunday morning. The darkness precedes the light. But it seems to me as I look at the Easter story that Easter begins not in clarity, but in confusion. So if I'm confused, if I'm afraid, if I'm filled with grief, then I'm in good company with Mary Magdalene. She's a good friend. There are 2 times recorded by Matthew that someone tells Mary Magdalene, do not be afraid. In Matthew 28:5, she's told that by the angel. In Matthew 28:10, she's told that by Jesus himself. Mary needs to hear the words, don't be afraid. I need to hear the words, don't be afraid. Maybe you do too. It's interesting to me that when Jesus appears before Mary, she did not recognize Jesus, which is a common theme in this story, the resurrection. Jesus made several appearances where he wasn't recognized. I really don't know why the writers told that part of the story. Here's how I'm applying it to my life. Maybe I'm supposed to take from that the fact that maybe Jesus is around me every day in different ways, but I'm just not aware of it. So maybe I need to open my eyes to Jesus in you, Jesus in someone else, Jesus in a flower that I see, Jesus in a situation. Jesus is aware, but we don't always see him, even though he is there. So Jesus was recognized by Mary only when he said to her, Mary. And she turned toward him, the scripture says, cried out in Aramaic, Rabboni. So when she hears her name, Mary, something shifts. That moment is for her a turning point. The turning point didn't come by seeing the angel, by seeing the empty tomb. The turning point came to her when she heard a voice that made her feel loved, seen, known, and safe. Over 35 years, Beth was in her first week of kindergarten, and the principal called Beth's mom, Kathy, to say that Beth had just had a seizure. Kathy rushed to the school, took Beth to the hospital where they ran an ample number of tests, but still could not find the problem. And so they sent Beth home. A few days later, Beth had another seizure, and another, and another. Kathy, her mom, says within a short period of time, we realized that the left hemisphere of Beth's brain was slowly shrinking, and the doctors had no idea why. Eventually, Beth was having about 100 seizures a day. Beth said it was like being on a roller coaster that you could not get off. But on that nonstop roller coaster of seizures, there was one moment during the day where she had no seizures. That moment of relief came in the form of Fred Rogers and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Whenever she would watch the 30-minute program of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, she had no seizures. Well, it was time for her surgery. And her mom, Kathy, wrote the studio, or called the studio where Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was produced, and told the person that answered the phone how healing and calming the show was to Beth. And she was just going to ask for maybe a signed picture or a thinking of you note from Mr. Rogers. But Mr. Rogers did one better. He went to visit Beth in the hospital. And this is what Beth said about Mr. Rogers. I found his voice comforting. I felt like he was talking to me and nobody else. Just imagine a child finds herself in chaos, but then she finds peace through someone's voice that makes her feel personal, safe, heard, and seen. I wonder if that's what happened to Mary. When she heard the voice, maybe Jesus' voice was like Mr. Rogers. And whatever that voice was, and however it sounded, she felt safe and seen and heard and valuable, worthy and accepted. You know, sometimes resurrection doesn't start with thunder and lightning. It starts with someone who calls your name and says your name in love. What Mary experienced through the voice of Jesus was an awakening. Awakenings can sometimes be jarring. A week ago Friday, I was coming home from a wedding rehearsal at Finley Farms in Ozark. It's about 6 o'clock. I was ready to get home, looking forward to making pizza with Denise, which is a Friday night tradition at our house. And I was just really enjoying the time and looking forward to that. I was going down whatever that road is that goes from Finley Farms to Highway 65 to head to Springfield. On my right, I saw a speed limit sign that said 35. Immediately to my left, I saw a Greene County Sheriff's car. And I said to myself, oh, rats. And sure enough, behind me were those blue flashing lights. That was an awakening. My mind went from thinking about what I was going to do to what I was presently doing. I went from the future, what I would be doing in 30 minutes or an hour, to the now. And I talk about living in the now a lot, but I got to be honest with you, that now sucked. It was a lot more fun thinking about what I was going to do an hour from now. But that's how resurrection, awakening moments sometimes work. We're speeding through life. We're focused on where we're going or what we're going to do next, when suddenly something stops us and forces us to pay attention to the now, to wake up. So Mary Magdalene arrived at the tomb that morning thinking about one thing: I'm going to take care, I'm going to put spices on this body of Jesus. But something happened. Her plans changed. She was brought to attention and she woke up. A stone was rolled away. There was an empty tomb. But more importantly than those things, there was a voice that communicated to her love and acceptance. I think Easter is for us that divine awakening. It is a divine interruption. You're going through a dark time. You're going through a confusing time. You're going through a very dark time. And Easter interrupts the darkness. Easter interrupts your fear. Easter interrupts your anxiety about life. And it tells you death doesn't have the final say. Despair is not the final emotion. There is light and there is love. It will have the final say. Next thing I want us to see is that resurrection is not a magic trick. It's a mandate. Too often, Easter does come across to us. We teach Easter as if it is some kind of a divine magic show. Jesus appears, then he disappears, and then he reappears, and everybody cheers because now we can go to heaven. But the point is, Easter was never designed to give us an escape plan. It was designed to give us a calling to do something. Who died and left you in charge is the question. Jesus died and he left us in charge of carrying on his service, his humility, his kindness, and his compassion. He died and left us in charge, not to spread hatred, but to extend love. Not to preserve privilege, but to ensure that everyone is belonging. Theologian Dorothy Soul says, the resurrection is not a miracle of the past. It is the miracle of the present. We are the resurrection every time we love in the face of hate, every time we hope in the face of despair. Jesus died and left us in charge so that we are now the hands that feed the hungry. We're the arms that embrace the lonely. We are the feet that march for justice. We are the body of Christ. We're not waiting on a second coming. If you believe in a second coming, we are participating in the first coming that is still unfolding us today. Well, let's get to the real reason why you're here today. Let's talk about 420. Let's connect Easter with that other notable date. Well, 420 is traced back to a group of 5 California high schoolers. Back in the 60s, early 70s, they would hang out a wall by their high school in San Rafael, and they got the name because they would hang out at this wall as Waldos, the Waldos. In the fall, and here they are as adults. The 5 Waldos right there. In 1971, they learned of a Coast Guard member who had planted a cannabis plant, but he could no longer care for the plant. And so he created a treasure map. And whoever could locate the plant through that treasure map would own the plant, would care for the plant, and they would enjoy the fruit of their labor. So once a week, maybe a couple times a week, these 5 Waldos would meet together at 4:20 in the afternoon after ball practice. They would get in the car, smoke some pot, and head to the forest and look on this map to see if they could find the plant. That's why we have 4:20. So how in the world does that relate to Easter today? Well, smoking pot is all about breathing. You breathe it out or breathe it in, and you breathe it out. That's what Easter's all about. The biblical word, the Hebrew and the Christian scriptures, the word for spirit is the same word for breath. So here's what I want us to do today. I want us to ask ourselves, when is the last time we took a holy breath? A breath that recentered us. A breath that in the midst of my darkness gave me a sense of acceptance and value. It gave me some light. A breath that reminded me I'm alive, I'm worth something, I am going to make it through this situation. That, I think, is what 420 can do for us. It is a breath that can remind us that we're going to be okay. It's not about getting high. It's about getting clear that you are loved, that you are valuable, and that you have a purpose. Someone once told me, Philip, I don't really go to church anymore, but I do sit on my porch and I burn some incense and I breathe, and that's where I feel God. I said, I like that. And I kind of think that that is a more spiritual experience than most of the sermons I've ever preached. Breathing and feeling God. One of my favorite people on the planet passed away a couple years ago, a Buddhist monk from Vietnam, Thich Nhat Hanh. Feelings come and go like clouds in a windy sky, but conscious breathing is my anchor. It centers me, he says. And in that breathing, I can move from a sense of darkness to light. So, take a deep breath with me. Imagine yourself drawing in love, courage, acceptance. And hold that breath for a moment. Feel the fullness of that life in your lungs, in your spirit. And when you exhale, just get rid of the hate. Exhale the fear. Exhale the discouragement. Exhale whatever is holding you back. And then breathe in love. What we breathe in sometimes is what we breathe out. We are in an atmosphere of acceptance. We are in the atmosphere of the Spirit. We live in the atmosphere of love. So breathe in the air around you. And when you breathe in love, you can breathe out love and justice and kindness. So let's imagine breathing out and rising up as it relates to the 4 values of the venues. We breathe in diversity and inclusion. We breathe out diversity and inclusion. And we rise from exclusion to inclusion. We rise out of the death of us and them to we, to everybody belonging. You know, Mary Magdalene was the very first preacher of the resurrection. All the gospel writers have different views and different remembrances of the resurrection. And one writer can contradict another writer. But one thing they all agree on is that Mary Magdalene was the preacher of the resurrection. Mary wasn't a man, she wasn't a bishop, she wasn't a rabbi. But the assignment for preaching about the resurrection was given to her, a woman who is in one of the most marginalized of all groups. So what does that mean for us? Practically, it means we have to look around at the table. Is somebody not here at our table? Is someone missing? And why is their voice not here? Who am I excluding in my own life? We have to rise in action concerning social justice. Jesus did not rise to retreat into heaven. He rose to ignite a movement. So we rise when we feed the hungry, when we march for peace, when we challenge discrimination and economic injustice. The poet Mary Oliver wrote, "Tell me, what is your plan? And what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" That's what the resurrection is. We arise to the fact that we have a great life, and we have a heavy, important mandate to continue the revolution of love. The Talmud, which is a commentary on the first 5 books of the Hebrew Scripture, was written around 100 CE, says, "Do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief." Do y'all feel daunted by things going on in our country today? These words help me. So do justly now, love mercy now, walk humbly now. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. We also rise into wonder through intellectual humility. You know, you may not believe in the physical resurrection as a literal historical fact, and that is perfectly okay. It is totally okay that you don't believe that it's a literal historical fact. But even if you don't believe it actually happened physically, it still can have an impact on your life. Because the story goes beyond that. It goes beyond the fact that there is the Spirit of Christ. There is the Spirit of love that is moving us to rise into service, and we have that intellectual humility that I don't understand all there is about resurrection, but I can still be impacted by that. We value curiosity and skepticism, so we rise into that awakening. The story told by John is that Thomas, one of the disciples, asked questions. He wasn't scolded, but Jesus said, "Hey, give me your best shot. I invite you to explore." You have questions about the resurrection. Easter is not about having all the answers. Easter is about showing up with your questions and knowing that those are good questions and they're okay. There's an old saying, after the resurrection, the laundry still piles up. Resurrection does not erase real life. It just lets me do the laundry in love. It lets me serve in love. It lets me walk into life in love. Dennis Beyer, a part of our community called the Venues, last Sunday said, "I got a good title for your Easter sermon, How to Roll a Stone." So how do we roll a stone? We breathe in the truth that God makes all things new. He makes my situation right now new. I breathe in, God, you make all things new. And I breathe out, everything's going to be all right. Just like smoking a joint. I breathe it in, and I feel everything's going to be all right. I breathe in, God's mercies are new every morning. It's crappy right now, but God's mercies are there. If I will just awaken to them, everything will be all right. Glennon Doyle, an activist and author, I love her, says Easter is about remembering that nothing beautiful comes without resurrection, but resurrection never comes without first walking through hell. And you may be walking through hell right now. It's the dark night of the crucifixion, but Sunday is coming. Be hopeful. We don't get to skip the hard parts, but we do get to rise. Not by escaping life, but by waking up to life. Not by floating away, but by digging in love, in justice, and in kindness. We dig in with breath. We dig in with one another. So the resurrection continues. We rise up again every time we love, every time we show kindness, every time we encourage someone. We started today in the teaching time with Imagine, because we dare to dream that there can be a better world. where peace is not just a fantasy, it's a possibility that we will create peace. Maybe the resurrection is not so much something to believe in. Maybe the resurrection is something that we build. And I invite you to do that.